Indie Cross, the best video game crossover since Super Smash Bros. But what do we really know about it? Here's 10 things about Indie Cross. Alright, before we get into it, subscribe. Indie Cross, as the name suggests, is a Friday Night Funkin' mod in which Boyfriend travels to multiple different indie game universes to do what he does best. The term indie refers to the classification of games that were developed and released without the help of a publisher. For example, Nintendo publishes Xenoblade Chronicles, which is made by Monolith Soft, making it not indie. But Rogue Legacy is both published and produced by Cellar Door Games, thus making it indie. The crossover games featured in this mod all have this sort of underdog story where, despite not having the backing of a known publishing company, the games still received massive success and a fan base of their own. This is very similar to the production of Funkin itself, which, despite the fact that it's a passion project with a small team, it still exploded with popularity just like other properties featured in this mod. We begin our journey in the world of Cuphead, where Boyfriend is mistaken as an opponent by the titular character, having to rap and regular battle them. Cuphead's animations mostly contain him pointing, because the game they originate from is a platforming shooter. Boyfriend needs cards to attack Cuphead because in their game, cards are used to represent if Cuphead can use a special or not. The game over screen shows the progress of the song, much as the game over screen shows the progress of the boss fight in Cuphead, and parry notes are the same color as objects that can be parried in Cuphead. Those of you who have played Cuphead know that there's no spoken dialogue from the titular character throughout the game. Cuphead's voice is based on the character's manner of speaking in the Cuphead show. The Cuphead show loosely follows the plot of the game, but alters it in a way where it's more or less the characters in Cuphead and how they fit into the world and interact, similar to how the show uses music from the game as the basis of its soundtrack. Indie Cross also emulates the game's soundtrack with more of an electro swing twist. The final song of the week, Knockout, references the motifs of several of the base game's boss fights like King Dice, the Devil, and Hildeberg.
I'm Mr. King Dice. I'm the gamest in the land.
Before we move on to fact number 4, I do want to let you guys know that yes, Bugman is doing the Family Guy default fall down. Next, we find ourselves in the final stretch of the hit RPG Undertale. Normally, this is the final walkthrough towards the fight with Asgore, but due to the fact that Sans is here and waiting, implies this week takes place during a genocide route, which is affirmed by the appearance of Chara after the first song, Whoopee. Whoopee is named after the prank Sans pulls when first meeting the player in Undertale, the whoopee cushion in the hand trick. Sensational is a pun on the word sensational, likely because the Skeleton Brothers rely on puns as the majority of their humor in Undertale. Final Stretch is likely named after the Final Stretch achievements given to the console players of Undertale once they reach and progress in the Hotlands. And Burning in Hell is a reference to the now famous Sans quote, "It's a beautiful day outside, birds are singing, flowers are blooming. On days like these, kids like you should be burning in hell." Sans' week has multiple endings based on if the player attacked them 3 or more times during Sensational, resulting in either Final Stretch or Burning in Hell. This is of course a reference to the 2 main ways the player can beat Undertale, a pacifist run where they don't kill anyone, or a genocide run where everything must perish. Sans dodges all of Boyfriend's attacks because that's what happens during their fight in Undertale. And just like in the base game, Sans is only defeated by a sneak attack. Another mechanic brought over is the use of blue and orange arrows in attacks. In Undertale, blue attacks don't hurt the player if they're standing still, but orange attacks need to be moved through in order to avoid damage. This is why blue arrows shouldn't be hit and orange arrows should. This also applies to Sans' attack during their nightmare mode, making blue bones actually deal damage when dodged because the player moved. Mostly because the game was created and developed by a composer, Toby Fox, Undertale is known for its music, and Indie Cross implements these motifs from the game into its soundtrack. Every song in Sans' week has the motif of Megalovania in it, including the Homestuck version in Whoopee. As well as Sans' motif used in both the songs Sans and Song That May Play When You Fight Sans from Undertale. We also get a sprinkling of motifs from certain areas of Undertale, like Waterfall, Core, and his theme. Sensational has the motif of roses from the base game. And tell me if I'm stretching it, but I think I know why. Undertale delves into themes of player versus character, especially during the game's genocide route. As seen in this week's cutscenes, the evil entity known as Chara and the character Frisk are two separate beings, similar to how Senpai and Spirit in base Funkin are portrayed as being a body and soul. Sans also references the fact that players take multiple attempts to defeat him, and even comments when the player removes mechanics from their song. And finally, we find ourselves in the spooky world of Bendy and the Ink Machine. Bendy is a Bioshock and Amnesia-inspired horror game that takes place in Joey Drew Studios, an animation company on the brink of bankruptcy. The game follows Henry Stein, an ex-employee of JD Studios, and follows their journey through their once-beloved workplace and the horrifying discoveries that follow. Funnily enough, I actually had someone reach out to me on Twitter to give me their insight into this part of the mod, so thank you Light Magna for your help on this section of the video. Boyfriend finds himself in Joey Drew Studios, and assuming that they're just another opponent, faces off against a cutout of Bendy, completely unaware of the dangers ahead. Throughout Ink Machine, these Bendy cutouts are used to create pseudo jump scares and an unsettling atmosphere. At the end of Chapter 3, Henry is tasked with destroying all the Bendy cutouts on that floor for Angel, who then reveals that the Ink Demon hates when these cutouts are vandalized, thus sending him Henry's way. When Boyfriend knocks over the cutout in this week to summon the Ink Demon, that's a reference to that part in Ink Machine. The song is likely called Imminent Demise because we, the player, know that there's something else besides the Bendy cutouts in the studio. The song Terrible Sin is named after the alternate Bendy cutouts of the same name that appear at least once in each chapter. Last Reel shares its name with the final chapter of Ink Machine, and Nightmare Run is named after the mobile game spin-off Bendy and Nightmare Run. Just like Cuphead and Undertale, mechanics from Bendy and the Ink Machine are implemented into Indie Cross. The ink notes that cover the screen are a reference to the way damage is indicated in Bendy, incrementally covering the player's screen as opposed to a health bar. The Bendy pop-up distractions are from the pseudo jump scares in the base game, and the Butcher Gang members attacking Boyfriend and distracting the player are enemies used in the base game, though I don't ever remember them flipping me the bird. Additionally, the distracting mechanics like the screen dimming in and out and the ink distortion are both indicators from the base game that the Ink Demon is nearby. Unlike Undertale, Bendy isn't really known for its music and more its atmosphere, so the musical motif department is a little lacking, but there are nods to the tricky song Hell Clown and Zavadilla from Midfight Masses in Nightmare Run. At the end of the credits, filled with all of the creative people who worked on this mod, there's a message that reads, Indie Cross will return, meaning Boyfriend's journey through the many paralleled universes of indie games is far from over. Two secret songs, Sinesse from Senior Palo's Underpants series, and The Goose from Untitled Goose Game may be hints to future content. The intro features Shovel Knight, Five Nights at Freddy's, and the files of the Streamer build have 3 currently unused songs featuring Baldi's Basics, Binding of Isaac, and Madeline from Celeste. Right before the credits end, there's a distant reverberating scream that can be heard. This is taken directly from the final boss of Hollow Knight, The Radiance, which is another indie game we're most likely to be seeing in a future version of Indie Cross. Another thing to note is that YouTuber DA Games is one of the directors and musicians of this mod, and his music video Cuphead's song Brothers in Arms was a major inspiration for Indie Cross. As featured in this music video, the neighbor from Hello Neighbor can be seen as one of the bosses, so take that as you will. And that's 10 things about Indie Cross. I hope you enjoyed. Before I leave, I gotta ask, who do you think is gonna make it into Indie Cross? Personally, I could see a week or maybe a one-off song dedicated to Fez. It's the closest thing we'll get to Fez 2. Alright, thanks for watching. Until next time.